Hey, it's Adam Platt. Welcome to Unleash Your Greatness. Today we're going to be talking about finding peace amongst the chaos and uncertainty in life. So stay tuned for that conversation. All right, welcome back. Today we're talking about how to find that inner peace amongst all the chaos and uncertainty that's been going on. And the reason why I decided to talk about this is as we come out of 2020 and into 2021 and things are kind of starting to open up around the world with COVID and everything, I've done a lot of self-reflection. I've done a lot of learning. I've done a lot of research on what happened, why there was so much of this just craziness and uncertainty that happened and how that affected so many people. And so I really wanted to talk about how we can find peace, because 2020 was an awful year, but that doesn't mean that going forward, we're not going to run into times, either as a society or as a individual where we're going to find times of uncertainty. It's guaranteed that you're going to find times where you're just uncertain, you're scared, you're pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. And so I really wanted to talk about how we can find peace in those situations and how we can overcome those types of feelings, that fear of uncertainty and chaos that might arise throughout our day, throughout our weeks, throughout our year, months, whatever. And so I think it's really important conversation to have about our self-wellness, our health, and to not get so stressed out about things. And there's only so many things that we can really control in our life. And so worrying about so much of it is not good for us. It causes a lot of stress. Now, a certain amount of stress is always going to be there, and that's okay. But if we get so stressed out, then we start getting things like anxiety, we start getting things like depression, and that's not good for us. That's not good for our health, our well-being, our spirit, our mind, our mental health. All those things are affected when we get too stressed. We start going into that anxiety, depression, those types of things. So I think it's a really important conversation that we have about how we can be calm and find peace amongst the uncertainty and the chaos that might arise. So let's talk about it. 2020 taught us a lot about uncertainty. There was a lot of uncertainty that happened. There was a lot of things that went on between here in America, the politics, the election, COVID, jobs, just all kinds of things that really caused a lot of problems for a lot of people and a lot of uncertainty. And a lot of people suffered, a lot of people struggled during 2020 and are still suffering, even though we're starting to see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. We're starting to come out of it. Things are starting to open up here in Utah. Things are starting to open up a little bit more. We're hearing rumors or having word come down from the government officials that masks are going to be done away with. We aren't going to have to wear masks unless you feel like you need to, thanks to the vaccine that's been released and been going out and helping cause a lot more people to not worry so much about COVID, and your thoughts aside from the vaccine, whether pro or against it, is beside the point. But it has helped calm a lot of the people who have been scared about the problems that have been going on. So that's a good thing, but that doesn't mean that things aren't still out there. So how can we find peace and calmness amongst the chaos and the uncertainty that surrounds our lives? Let's talk a little bit about it. Most of the uncertainty comes from fear. And fear is one of the biggest players in what causes us to really struggle with what we're dealing with. And most fear is a fear of what could happen, right? It's really like, it's stuff that we make up in our mind. If I quit my job and I go after to start this new business, I could lose everything. I could lose my house. I could lose my family's going to go hungry. All these things that we tell ourselves, right? Okay, is there a possibility that could happen? Yes, there is a possibility. But the beautiful thing is we can deal with that by one of two ways. Number one, I would suggest take a piece of paper and write all your fears down around that situation. Okay, write them down. If I want to start a company and quit my job, what's the fears? The fears are I'm going to lose my 401k. I'm not going to have vacation time. I'm not going to have stability in a paycheck that's going to come in every week. I'm not going to have, a 9-to-5 job that I know will pay me. I could lose my house if the business doesn't do well. I could have to take out bankruptcy. My family could go hungry, or I could lose everything. All these things, right? Write them all down. All the fears, write them down. And then on the other side of the paper, so do that on one side, split the paper in half, and on the other side, write down all the pros, right? So this is a pros and cons. This is pretty simple. But I really want to focus on the fears and then what really could happen, okay? What's the good that could happen? The good is I could be successful. I could make a lot of money. I could have more freedom to spend time with my family. I could have more stability in the things that I want to do. I could have the freedom to travel, or I could make more money, right? I could be my own boss. I can work from home, whatever it is, all those things. And you can do this with anything that you're dealing with. Maybe it's I am struggling with my relationships. Well, if I go to my spouse and I tell them about what's going on, what's the fears that could happen? They could laugh at me. They could, I don't know, right? Hopefully your spouse isn't going to laugh at you, but that could be a fear that your spouse is not going to be happy with you telling them what's going on, or all these different types of things. Maybe you have a fear around the COVID pandemic. What's the fears that you are facing there, right? Maybe you do contract COVID. Maybe you're afraid that someone is going to get sick. Maybe, all these things, right, that could happen. Write them all down. Write all the fears down, and then write all the pros down of what you're dealing with. And here's what I really want you to do is then I want you to go through your fears specifically and look at it and say, is that a valid fear? Is that really something that could happen? Is it possible? And then I would give it a percentage. Like, what is the percentage that could happen? Is it 50%? Is it 60%? Is it 10%? Is it 1%? Give it a percentage of what could it possibly happen? Now, if you look at it and you're like, yeah, that's probably not going to happen, just cross it off. Like, come to terms with it and be like, yeah, that's probably not going to happen. And then the things that are high on like the percentage, like, okay, I could lose my house. What we need to do is we need to come to terms with it and evaluate, is the risk worth the rewards? Look at your list of the rewards, the pros, and say, is the risk that could happen, and I could lose my home if I start this business, is it worth the rewards? And then come to terms. And like, worst case scenario, okay, I lose my house, I take out bankruptcy, I have to, here's the facts about that though. There's other houses, right? Yes, they could happen. You could take out bankruptcy. Bankruptcy here in the United States was set up for your benefit, for businesses, so that you can take risk, so that you can go after your dreams and your goals and create a life that you want. That's what it's there for. That's why the founding fathers put it in place. So, is that really a fear, or is it a fear of something else? But if that's the fear, like the fear is I could lose everything, I could have to take out bankruptcy, I could lose my house. Okay, there's other houses. Maybe you have to move into an apartment. Maybe you have to move into family members. And then you work through that fear. And here's how you work through the fear. Number one, you look at where you feel the fear. So you think about the fear and you look about where you feel the fear in your body. Is it your heart? Is it your gut? Is it your neck, your head? Does it give you a headache? Where do you feel that fear? And then just feel it. Just sit with it. And as you sit with it, you start to come to terms with it. You don't try to push it away. You don't try to push it down. You don't try to minimize it. You just sit with it. What would happen if I lost my home? And sit with it. And as you sit with it, this is what psychiatrists do with patients when they got major fears, is they help work them through that fear. And a part of having to work through that fear is sitting with it and understanding it. And not trying to do away with it, not trying to make yourself feel better. Just sit with it and be like, okay, what if I do lose my home? What happens then? What's a plan I could have in place if that happens? I could move into an apartment. I could ask family maybe if I could move in with them temporarily while I get back on my feet. I could find another house. I could, all these things, right? But just what's the worst case scenario? And that's how we can find peace amongst chaos, amongst fear, amongst all the uncertainty that's happening, is we just have to be okay taking that fear and sitting with it. And, here's another tool that helps me when I'm dealing with my fears is to journal about it. Write a letter to that fear. Hey, fear. Hey, if I lose my house, I think that will be horrible because why? Because I feel like a horrible provider for my family. As a husband and a father, I've let my family down. And then you have a discussion about that fear with yourself. You write a letter, you journal about it, whatever you want to call it, right? But you sit with that fear and you understand. Once we become like okay with the worst case scenario, now all of a sudden you step back and you're like, that's not so bad. And you're like, yeah, if I go after this thing in my life, then is that going to be so bad? But what if it pays off? What if it pays off? And some things, as you start making a list of your fears over anything, it could be over the election, it could be over your relationships, it could be over your job, it could be over, whatever it is, COVID, it could be over anything. The fact of the matter is there's only so much that you can really do much about. And worrying about those things, like the election, you have very, very, very little output of what can actually affect the election. Yes, you can go and you can vote, and that can be a small little drop in the bucket of the outcome. But most unlikely, it's not going to do a whole lot about. And going and reading posts on Facebook or reading the news or all these negative things that we get sucked into isn't going to help. It's not going to help one bit. So what we can do is, one, minimize the effects of those things, push them away, try to get them away from us as much as possible. Don't let them affect us, because all those negative thoughts, all those negative stories, all those negative things that we hear, and then we start telling ourselves, doesn't help us. And then just step back and be like, can I have any effect over this in my life? And if you can't, you let it go, right? You journal about it, you write a letter about it, you do whatever, and you let it go, because you can't do anything to affect it. And the stuff that you can affect, then the fear you have to take on and you have to sit with and decide if that's something that you really want to stress out about. And I really think that if you go down those roads of taking your fears, deciding whether it's something that will happen, like definitely will happen, definitely maybe could happen, and probably not going to happen, and you sort them out, the fears, you'll find that a lot of them they may not happen, or they probably won't happen. Very few of them will. Yes, this more than likely will happen. And the ones that are very much could happen, you have to look and say, is this fear something I can affect? Is it something I can have a outcome about? And if you can't, there's no point in worrying about it. There's no point in doing anything about it. You can't fix it. You can't do anything. All you can do is internalize it, sit with it, and be like, okay, how am I going to move forward past this? Because most things we have very little control over. The only thing that we can control is our emotions, how we internalize things, and then how we respond to those emotions and the things that we decide to internalize. And that is power, you guys. That is the most powerful thing. And that's one of the biggest things that I've learned in this last year as we've dealt with 2020 is you've got to learn to sit with it. And you've got to decide, what can I really change? What do I have control over? And the things that I don't, I let go. The things that I do, I internalize, and I decide, what is the fear? How likely is this fear that's going to happen? And then if it more than likely very well could happen, then I sit with it and become like, okay, what's the worst case scenario that happens in this situation? And you move past it and you go on. You sit with it. You decide if it's worth putting effort and energy into, and then you got to decide to let it go at some point and stop thinking about it and worrying about it. So that's what I've got for you today. I hope that serves you. I hope that you can, if you're dealing with some of these things, if you've got stress, if you've got anxiety, if you're dealing with some depression, number one, if it's super, super, super bad, please, please, please get help. Please don't let it sit with you for super long time. We all deal with some of it at some point. But if you have been with it long term and it's been going on a long time, please talk to somebody. Please don't take matters in your own hands. But the other thing is, I hope that you'll take this and be like, okay, what can I do in this situation? What can I really change? What can I affect? And more than not, you'll find that the only thing you can really change is how you view it, how you think about it, and how you respond to it. So I hope that serves you. I hope that helps. 2021 is going to be so much better. Trust me, things are going to start opening up. Things are going to start being so much better. We learned so much from 2020, and tomorrow is a new day, you guys. Tomorrow is a great day, and we've got a lot of amazing things to look forward to in life and as we go forward into 2021. So hold your head up. Unleash the greatness, tap into that greatness that you have within yourself today. Go out, make your impact, and live your life to the fullest and the best that you can today. And we will see you in future episodes.